When we die, what will happen with us? Sorry, that's a big question.
Well, look, I'm a Catholic priest. The traditional Catholic answer is you will be judged. God doesn't send people to hell. People send themselves there. People mistake the mercy of God for a get-out-of-jail-free card, but it's not. So the people who are most likely in danger of going to hell are the really powerful people of the world. So my name is Matt or Mateo. I call myself Mateo here in Spain because that's my Spanish name, but my name is Matt or Matthew. I'm from New Zealand. I entered the seminary when I was about 27, so I'd actually done quite a few things before I entered the seminary. I'd been away from the church for a good decade, really. I never rejected it, but it just wasn't important. I had better things to do. But after about 10 years of that, I found that I wasn't very happy, so I sort of re-looked at my faith and found and discovered anew, if you want, from reading, but also from entering into the liturgy and all that sort of stuff. So during that period, I got a sense of a call from God, and I answered that call and entered the seminary when I was 27, and never looked back, really. I've been, from the time just before I got ordained, they sent me to be a teacher. So most of my priestly life, I'm a Marist, so I became a Marist. Most of my Marist priestly life has been teaching in schools. So I've been doing that for the last 14 years. And then I was probably ready for a change, and my boss in Rome asked me to come and become the director of this albergue here in Sahagún. And so I said yes. And so I arrived here in March of this year, and here I am. There's been quite a movement in the last 5 years, just in the last 5 years, especially in England, especially in France. I think Germany and that is not quite so much, but certainly in England and certainly in France, which is they're pretty secular. But the last 5 years, there's just been this uptick in people interested in the faith, becoming Catholic, and the biggest demographic, young men.
Wow.
Which is really interesting. So I think as the younger generation just don't have that sort of turn-off thing that a lot of the baby boomers and people do, you know? When I was young, going to Mass, a faith life was just normal. It was just everyday part of life. I didn't really think anything of it. I was an altar boy, and it was all right because it was a bit more interesting than just going to Mass. I got to do a few things. I was never deeply spiritual as a young fella, but at the same time, I was very comfortable in that world. It just seemed normal to me. And then the 10 years of university and school and that, where I wanted to do different things and felt that religion was probably a bit of a restriction. But then when you go and do all those things, and then you discover they're actually after a while pretty boring. There's not much to them, and they actually empty you out, and you feel really empty, and then you're just like, oh, is this all there is? And that's when I kind of returned to, and when I returned to my faith, it was like, the shutters came off, and it was a realization, I've always known this. I've always known this. This is not something new. This is a return to who I am. Whereas the 10 years of living a hedonistic life was actually not who I was. Not really me. Even though I did it with gusto, it was actually ultimately boring. I questioned everything. Yeah, when I first started going back and rediscovering my faith, I was absolutely adamant. I'm not just going to accept everything. I am going to question everything. And I questioned everything. But in fact, what I discovered is those questions have been asked before many times over 2,000 years by many much more intelligent people than me. And so I did a lot of reading. And nowadays, and that's what I was saying before about a lot of young people coming back into the church, one of the reasons they are is there's such good catechesis, there's such good resources and material on the internet now that anyone can access it. Anyone. You don't have to be reading a book. There's just so many really good people evangelizing online that there's just this mountain of young people who are just accessing it and just getting they're being fed intellectually, which is a really important part. It's not the only part, to be fair. It's one part, but it's a very important part. But that part can lead into then the liturgy, spirituality, all those things that then they go together. They're not separate. They don't exist apart from each other. If it's just intellectual, then it's just a philosophy. If it's just sort of faith with no thought, then it's just fideism, I suppose, is a traditional word, but it's not rooted and grounded in the Word. The Word made flesh. The Word made flesh is Jesus. And so, but that's another way to put it is the Logos, which is the rationality of God. And so we are rational creatures and we want reasons. We want to be, this is true. It's not just something that I want to be true, it actually is true. And so that is very important. And so those things go together. The intellectual, the rationality plus the kind of leap. Rationality can't get you all the way. It clears away a lot of the obstacles. But then there has to be a moment where you say yes to God, and that can be a scary moment because we hand over control, and that's really we want control. We much prefer to. That's why some people and lots of Christians who are believers, they don't let go of control. They still want control. So a deep spirituality is always a letting go of control. And look, none of us do it perfectly. We're all human. We all have our own backpack that we carry from the wounds of our childhood and the wounds of our whatever, going back all the way to the first parents, really. Everyone's carrying their backpack. Everyone's got a backpack they're carrying, and then as they get older and wiser, they realise that their parents had a backpack too. And then their parents had a backpack. So everyone's got a backpack of stuff that we carry that makes it difficult to live certain things, So that's okay. We're all sinners. We all have that backpack. But that's why giving ourselves over to God can be quite hard at times. So we are not angels. So we're not pure spirits or pure mind that just contemplates truth in some sort of rarefied, discombobulated form. We have bodies, and therefore we worship with our bodies. That means we make the sign of the cross, or we kneel, or we stand, or we throw our arms open, or we walk the Camino. We do a whole lot of things with our bodies to devote ourselves to God because we're human, because we're bodily creatures. And so therefore we should use our bodies to devote ourselves.
When we die, what will happen with us? Sorry, that's a big question.
Well, look, I'm a Catholic priest. The traditional Catholic answer is you will be judged. There's two judgments. There's a particular judgment and the final judgment. The particular judgment is you will die, your body starts to decompose, your soul leaves your body, and you will be judged according to your faith and according to your works, fundamentally according to your love, how much you've loved. And then at the end of time, we actually get our bodies back. And then there's the final judgment. And the final judgment is not different from the particular judgment, but some theologians think the final judgment is kind of like everyone sees everyone's judgment, which is quite scary when you think about it. But everyone kind of every person in the entire world sees everyone else's judgment in the entire world that's ever lived, which is quite a scary thought. But then at the same time, everyone will also see all the good you did, which is quite an interesting thought too. People talk about hell and, how can God send someone to hell? I'm going off a little bit on a tangent here, so just bear with me. But God doesn't send people to hell. People send themselves there. So, because everyone imagines that, you hear a lot about the mercy of God. There's no sin that can't be forgiven. God's mercy is infinite, blah, blah, blah. Okay, everyone how's this? Okay, that sounds nice. But then, what about all this other stuff over here when people do really bad things and they kill and they maim and they rape and they torture and they do all sorts of stuff, Okay. So how does that work? Well, people mistake the mercy of God for a get out of jail free card, but it's not. The mercy of God can only be merciful if it's rooted in the truth. So someone has to completely and utterly acknowledge their guilt, their sin, what they did. Now we're talking about bad stuff here, really bad stuff. Now, if that person who's done really bad stuff is ultimately says, yes, I did that, I'm sorry, then yes, everyone can be forgiven. Everything can be forgiven. But here's the thing. The sort of people, and this is why Jesus constantly warns about the danger of riches. Well, I think is one of the reasons. Because riches gives people power. And when people have power, they tend to step on other people and they think themselves better than other people. And they don't really notice that they're stepping on other people because they're more important. So it doesn't really matter. So the people who are most likely in danger of going to hell are the really powerful people of the world. Because when they get to the moment of judgment, perhaps God says to them, this is your life. Here it is. I don't know, maybe like a movie or something. Here is your life. This is the damage that you did in your life. Now, you can imagine someone who's poor, someone who's had a really terrible childhood, was beaten and, all sorts of terrible things happened. And then they went on and did some of those terrible things. Now, you can imagine them, but they've been in and out of jail, When they get to God, you can imagine them saying, yes, I did all that. I'm sorry. You can imagine the billionaire when God says, this is all you did. This was the damage you did. And you can imagine what that person says. No, it's not. That's not true. I didn't do that. He did that. It wasn't my fault. No, 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 no. God says, exit stage left. If you don't accept what you did, then mercy is not yours because you're not accepting. You have to accept what you have to own it. You have to say, yes, I did that and I'm sorry. Then mercy's yours. But you can imagine a whole lot of people saying, no, I didn't do that. That wasn't my fault. That was his fault, her fault. There you go. God doesn't send people to hell, people send themselves there because they refuse God's mercy. Now someone says, why would people refuse God's mercy? Because they refuse the truth. They refuse to look at the truth. So that's why powerful people need to be very careful. We can get very fixated when things don't go our way, often in tiny little bits of life, tiny little things. Suddenly it's not fair, Actually, it's often in my experience of life is it's often in the little things. You practice something, you practice loving, you practice forgiving, you practice handing over control, you practice all these things in the little things. If you do them in the little things that no one really notices, but you just do them in the little things, then that builds up your spiritual muscle to do them in the bigger things. But if you don't do them in the little things, then that has the opposite effect. Then you become more and more demanding and entitled, and why can't it be this way? And then God has no place then, because you've got it all sorted. It's like sort of you just want to control everything, but you can't. So when it all goes to custard, you're left floundering. But if you sort of learn to the little decisions of your life, can I say this doesn't really matter? This doesn't really matter. I just have to, okay, I'll give you an example. I mean, this is a little example. Tonight we had 15 names on that sheet of paper for dinner. 29 pilgrims turned up. Now that's frustrating for us. We're trying to, organise it, and then suddenly at 8 o'clock we've got to run around it. Now Tony got all annoyed, and I was annoyed too, but I was like, no, it doesn't matter. Does it really matter? No, it doesn't. I mean, it's a little bit frustrating, but it doesn't really matter. Those are those things in life where if you can say that in lots of situations, this doesn't really matter. I don't have to have everything the way I want it. Then you're more able to sort of be open to God in the spiritual realm, if you want. If you're praying about something and you say, look, I really want this, but then you say to yourself, actually, do I really need this? Maybe I don't. God, your will be done. So you sort of practice it in very concrete situations in your life, and then when it comes to that spiritual thing, it becomes more normal. Well, the other thing is everything we have is a gift, starting with your life. You didn't deserve to be born. You didn't have any part to play. Nothing you did was your greatness, or you didn't do anything. Life was given to you as a pure gift. Therefore, you should treat everything in life as a gift, but we don't. We treat it as entitled. Well, I'm entitled to all these things. You're not entitled to them actually at all. So don't think of yourself as entitled. If you don't think of yourself as entitled, then when it comes to your spiritual life with God, your relationship with God, you're much more able to allow him to sort of take charge or allow him to lead, because you realize that all this stuff's a gift. I didn't deserve to be. This life I have I didn't do anything to deserve it. Nothing. It's a gift. So therefore, it all flows from that, really.